All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. In the interest of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to first introduce myself, and then I'll let Trey introduce himself as well. My name is Maya Davis. I am the co-chair of the New Lawyers in Practice Committee with Trey, and I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and my name is Trey Ellis, and I am the co-chair of the New Lawyers in Practice Committee of the YLD alongside Maya, and I am also very excited to be here.
And so what we'll do now is we will have our panelists introduce themselves so you all are familiar with their names, and there's no particular order. It was pretty informal, so y'all feel free, don't everyone jump at once, but feel free to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your practice, and then of course we have some questions for you.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Ayanna Parker. I am in-house counsel, associate attorney at the North Carolina Education Lottery. Before I started here, I was in litigation for about 4 years. Started in workers' compensation law and then transitioned over to medical malpractice and some general liability work.
I'll go next. Oh, I didn't want to cut you off, Ayanna, sorry. Okay.
I was done, sorry.
Hi, everyone. Super glad to be here today. My name is Michelle Sawyer. Currently, I am an associate attorney at Piedmont Eastern Litigation here in Raleigh. I practice family law, criminal defense, and civil litigation. Before that, I was an assistant district attorney, also in Wake County.
Hi, I'm Katie Forbes. I'm an associate director at UBS in the risk department, and I do policy work. So my role is policy oversight, kind of reviewing risk policies, making sure they're updated on an annual basis, and just kind of anything related to risk policies. Previously, I was in general counsel at Credit Suisse. So my current role is UBS, used to be in Credit Suisse. The two organizations merged. So I've kind of stayed at the same place for this whole time. But previously I was in general counsel, and there I was doing like outside counsel opinion, sourcing, and writing related credit risk memos. So similar skill set, but technically I'm not in legal anymore, I'm in risk. And then prior to that, I actually did family law as well in Charlotte before I moved back to Raleigh.
And thank you all for that. And we wanted to send a warm welcome to you all for being our panelists. And thank you all for sharing in advance the great nuggets that we know you all will share. And so everyone is aware, what we'll do is Trey will ask the first question, I'll ask one, Trey will ask one, we'll kind of go back and forth, and then we'll open it up because again, like I said, this is informal, but we do want you all to feel free to ask questions to the panelists as well. So I'll let you all know once we're ready to open up the floor, and feel free to use the chat box or the private message for myself or Trey, and we can relay the questions, okay?
All right. So the first question, obviously we're going to start with the theme of transition. So each of you, mentioned various pit stops in your careers thus far, and was just curious about like when you began to think about a transition, how did you know that it was time to make a transition to a new position? And like exactly how did that process look? Were you reached out to by a recruiter? Did you do the reaching out to folks? And so, yeah, what prompted you to be able to think about like transitioning to a new position? And I guess we'll start, let's see, Ayanna, we'll start with you for this first question.
Well, mine's a little unique in that I went into law school not wanting to do litigation and sort of let law school and my mentors and professors and everyone around me tell me that I was really good at it and I had a calling for it and I should do it. And that is sort of what this focus of school was on and the job market looked like. And so I went into litigation, and I'm pretty sure from like week one, I knew I wanted to transition. And Maya's laughing because she's heard this before, but I wanted to transition very early on. And I thought it was just like doing workers' compensation law. I didn't like that. It was too run of the mill, too common, too not really, I don't want to say specialized, but it is a special area of law. But I just thought like it wasn't for me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to transition to something a little bit more complex of doing med mal. And for that transition, again, it was hard because I had only had 1 year of experience. And so med mal is a specialized area of law where it's kind of important for you to have some form of experience, especially like 2 or 3 years of litigation. And so I worked with a recruiter to jump into that position, and really just trusted my personality and stuff and my interview skills to get me into that position. But I had to work hard to stay and to keep up in what I was doing. And then, was in that for 2.5 years. And again, just was like, I don't like litigation. So for me, I had to be super honest with myself about what I wanted to do, and just knowing that I didn't want to keep dragging my feet. Um, and my second job, switching to this job, was all me. I was very intentional. I was applying for jobs, but I was very intentional about what I was looking for, what interviews I was taking. I wasn't just going to take an offer just to take it. So I had some goals and ideas of what I wanted my work life to look like. But that was all self transition.
Um,
Michelle, do you want to go next? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pop in and go next. And I'm sorry, my dog always feels the need to be a part of any time I'm on a Zoom call or anything. So Jack says hi. So for me, I think I knew it was time to make the transition when, and I think we might get into this a little later, but when I could tell that it was starting to have an effect on my mental health. Like I had kind of said, the area that I had started to specialize in the DA's office, it was heavy stuff, right? And surprisingly, it wasn't the heaviness of the cases that was affecting me more so than, I'll just be quite honest, inter-office, interpersonal issues, systematic issues that I was kind of like, the work I'm doing is already really heavy, to have to, carry the constant load of worrying about my office environment or things like that. Those two mixed together started getting a little too heavy. And it was hard because I loved the job. I loved the work. And if you would have told me in law school, even like up to my last year of law school, that I was going to be a prosecutor, I would have never believed you. That was never something that I was interested in doing, but I interned at the DA's office, worked there during law school, fell in love with it. And that's where I went right after I graduated. But I knew that I always wanted to do family law. And so I knew a transition would come at some point. But honestly, I did not expect it to be that soon. I was at the DA's office for just under 2 years, about a year and a half. And how I got my job at my firm now, it was actually a personal connection. My managing attorney now, when I returned to the DA's office to work, after I had passed the bar and gotten sworn in, he was the first person that I had a trial against. And from there, we just kind of like connected. Like after the trial was over, he came up to me and he was just like, "You did a really great job. Like I saw that you were a Central, alum. I am too. Like, let's connect." And so we had stayed kind of like really good, acquaintances after that. And so there was a time where multiple people had started approaching me about if I was interested in leaving the DA's office. And I think that this might come up later too about how we chose, but that's how I ended up connecting with my managing attorney now and working at the firm that I'm at. I hope that answered the question.
And Katie?
Yeah, okay, so mine is a little bit different. I really enjoyed my job prior to this current role. But after the acquisition of Credit Suisse by UBS, I was on the Credit Suisse side. And so a lot of my team and kind of the things that we were doing, there was duplication with what already existed in the UBS infrastructure. And so kind of over time, what we were doing was chipped down, and it became clear that most of our team was probably going to go away. So for me, it was my job is going away. I need to find something else. And also just kind of being in legal on the Credit Suisse side, as the merger happened, as things continued to be integrated, it was just also kind of a bad environment. Morale was really low. A lot of people's jobs were going away. And so it was just kind of time to move on. I had been with legal for almost 7 years. And so it was a little scary to kind of try to jump to a different area. But risk is very closely related to legal. And so there's a similar skill set. And you know, I had a connection in that my husband used to work in risk. He also now works at UBS, and he has worked at CS, now at UBS. 2023 was a stressful year for us because we both worked at Credit Suisse, but we both survived the merger. Anyway, and so I had a connection there, and so I was able to meet a couple people in risk, and then was able to kind of interview for a couple roles, and I was offered 2 different roles, ended up taking one. And yeah, it's been really good and interesting. It was a big shift kind of from how I'm used to working. Like in legal, there were more long timelines. Like you would reach out to outside counsel, you would get a legal opinion, you would review it, you would write the credit risk memo. And in policy work, it's a bit quicker and there's like a lot of moving parts. So it was an adjustment in how I was used to working, but it's still a similar skill set. And so it's been really interesting and a great kind of new challenge. And I mean, honestly, if you're in the same role for, that length of time, sometimes you need a new challenge. And so it was probably for the best anyway. And I'll be in this current role for a year in June. And yeah, it's been really interesting and I look forward to learning more. But yeah, it was scary at first, for sure.
Thank you all. And you all talked a lot about heaviness, work-life balance, intentionality, and the environment. I think those were 4 common themes that I saw across the board. So what role did your career goals and personal values play in your decision to transition to a new role or stay in a job longer than you would have? And I can repeat it. I know that was a lot, so I'll repeat it one more time. So what role did your career goals and personal values play in your decision to either transition to a new job or stay at a job longer than you expected? And I'll start with either Katie or Michelle on this one.
So kind of, I guess the first part of the question, how my values and career goals, pushed me to kind of either stay in a position or a new one. So to me, it was really important to stay in-house. As I said, I actually used to do family law, and it's a wonderful, special kind of person who can do family law because it can be hard on you, and people can sometimes be at their worst because it's a terrible time in their lives. And so for me, that was not great. And the firm I was at was kind of toxic. They were super duper focused on billing, sometimes even to the detriment of their clients, in my opinion. And so I kind of wanted to move in-house. And so when I found my role at Credit Suisse, it had a much better work-life balance. It had great benefits. Whenever my husband and I started having kids, it had great maternity leave, all those like good benefits. And so when the merger happened, I was really trying to kind of stay in this in-house environment because I really liked the in-house environment. I liked the people I worked with. And I did honestly like my job before it got kind of whittled down. So I chose to try to look for another position using the internal mobility board that UBS had in place. UBS was trying to retain as many Credit Suisse employees as possible just by kind of moving them around into open UBS roles. And so I wanted to stay, and so I looked in the internal mobility board, applied for a bunch of stuff, had a lot of interviews, and then found something that would fit, that would allow me to stay at the same organization, stay in house, even if it's not technically in legal where I was before. It's still a related field still a similar set of skills, and allows me to keep that same good work-life balance and flexibility for family. Because, we have 2 kids, we might have another kid. It's nice to have that like hybrid work-life balance. Like we have 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, and people are pretty flexible about like if you have to leave early for, a kid's doctor appointment or whatever, it's completely fine. And so that flexibility is really nice whenever you have a young family, and just kind of for your own mental health, with a good work-life balance. So yeah, that was kind of the main reason that I stayed, and then kind of stayed at the same place, just in a different role.
Okay, for me, my values are pretty much the same on both sides. It's why I stayed and also what helped me transition to my current role. So I'll be pretty honest, I am very financially motivated. And that is why I stayed in private practice because it paid well and the firm I was at, I could be completely remote. So I mostly worked from home. I could come into the office when I wanted to, but I had the flexibility of, just getting up and going downstairs to get on the computer. So I didn't have to drive. I didn't have to put miles on my car. I pocketed a lot of money from not having to spend gas or spend as much money on food, going out to lunches, things like that. I also love to travel. I don't have kids, so I was able to, with working in the firm, the billable hour structure is set up where I could take a day off and travel or go hang out with my friends or do whatever as long as I made up my time. The billable hour standard was high, but it was pretty manageable from what you see from big law firms. So for me, that was like a motivating factor of like, okay, I'm in litigation, I'm dreading it, but here are all the things that I get that I don't think I will get if I leave. And that was partially true. For me, switching over to in-house and a state job at that, it was a bit of a change. I, again, financially motivated, so the offer had to be, correct for me. And I had to give up my being completely remote and switching to 3 days a week. But in exchange for that, when I leave the office I come in super early. So a lot of times I leave at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So I get my afternoon back. And when I leave work, like I leave work, I can turn my work phone off. I don't turn my laptop back on. No one's looking for me at night or over the weekend because if it's especially in a state job, like it's whatever it is going to have to wait till normal business hours on a Monday. Whereas when I was in litigation, partners would call me at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. Hey, we have this in the morning. We need to meet at 8 a.m. Can you get up by 5? I don't have all of those pressures. And it's a little bit different, like with the PTO, but again, still super flexible if I need to leave early for a doctor's appointment or work from home because I don't feel well. Like there's still a lot of flexibility. So that was super important to me. And that's why I said, like, on both sides, I had to weigh the pros and cons, which made me be super intentional about where I was going to when I left the firm.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all sharing that deeply introspective process that takes place when thinking about making a move. And yeah, I think that it definitely does contribute to the intentionality of staying or of the destination of where you would be going next. So thank you for sharing that. Speaking of that introspection, wanted to ask, make the general statement that change, whether or not you're expecting it, is not always the easiest. And so with that can come some level of trepidation or fear. And so in you all's transitions, were there any fears that were associated with making the career transitions? And if there were any fears, how did you overcome those, or what processes did you use to surmount those fears? So we'll start with Katie on this one, and then we'll go back through the lineup.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as I mentioned before, it was kind of scary whenever I realized I was going to have to start looking for a job for the first time in many years. So yeah, it was definitely scary, but I knew it was going to be the best thing for myself and my family. My priority was to stay internal, but I did also look for other roles outside of Credit Suisse UBS. And so, yeah, when I put like open to work on my LinkedIn profile, I was contacted by a lot of recruiters, and I did interview with some outside places as well, including SAS and Wells Fargo. And I even got a job offer from Wells Fargo, but I ended up deciding to turn that down because I would have had to move to Charlotte. But yeah, it was scary because I hadn't interviewed in a while, and I hadn't gone through that process in a while. But I just knew that it would be the best thing for me and that it would be a new, exciting challenge. So I just tried to kind of focus on what I remembered from interviewing and just from interacting with people generally. Brushed up my resume, practiced interviewing, and it ended up being fine. But yeah, the whole process was definitely scary and stressful, and you just have to try to remain positive and remember that your end goal is to do something that's going to be good for you in the long run. And yeah, I mean, looking for a new role is almost kind of a full-time job in itself. So that was tricky too to balance with current role, family. So yeah, that was challenging as well, but in the end, it ended up being fine. You know, people are generally really nice, and when you get into an interview or get to talking with people, as long as you kind of know how to, sell your best strengths and talk about why you would be a good fit for the role, it's not really as scary as you think. So for me, it was just kind of overcoming that initial fear and then just doing it. And then once the interview process is started, it wasn't as scary anymore.
Ayana.
I have a slightly different take from Katie, not knocking anything that Katie said. But for me, the interview or like searching for work process wasn't scary. I worked at 3 firms in 4 years. So for me, I was on the move. Like I putting in resumes wasn't the scary part for me. The scary part for me was actually getting the role that I'm in because like I said, I was in litigation for 4 years. That's all I knew. That's all I did. And I am now in a role where I'm doing regulatory work, completely opposite of litigation. I'm not in a courtroom. I'm writing rules and regulations and bills and laws and overseeing like sports wagering. I'm doing a lot of things that I had never even touched, never even heard of. Administrative hearings, I had a little bit of experience with from the litigation side, but not from the commission side. So it's completely different. Plus, you're working in government and politics, and it was literally a 180 from what I was doing. And that for my first like 3 months was super scary because I came to work every day not knowing what I was talking about or what anyone around me was talking about. I didn't understand any of the acronyms. And every day I would leave and be like, they're going to fire me because I don't know. I can't contribute to any conversations and I don't know what's going on. And I'm just showing up. So it was scary for the first 3 years. But I think like just continuing to give it a chance and just being a sponge, being here, learning, jumping in where you are comfortable jumping in and doing it at your own pace and just again, making sure that when you're searching for that role, that you find a work community that's understanding of who you are, like what you're bringing to the table, right? So I found a boss and coworkers who were very patient and understood that I had never done this type of work before, but I had, a great set of skills and intelligence that I could bring to this work once I understood what the trend, once I bridged the gap between what I'm doing now and what I had to offer. And so it just took some time and, effort from both sides. And that sort of bridged the scariness. I still get the Sunday scaries, and every Monday I come in here and like, okay, well, we'll see how it goes this week. But yeah.
So for me, I think there was 2 main factors, and one of them was everything that, Ayana was saying towards the end. I straight out of, graduation and after passing the bar, I went to the DA's office. So criminal law, criminal procedure, that's all I knew. That's all I operated on. And so knowing that I was switching to family law, I knew that I would be doing some criminal defense, but our practice is mainly family law, mixed with a little civil litigation. I had cobwebs in the civil procedure part of my brain. And so my thing was like, I'm switching and having to, relearn essentially a new area of law, a new practice format, rules, procedures that I wasn't used to. And so kind of like, Yana was saying, when I came into this, it felt like everything, like every time someone talked, it would just like be like this in my head, like, acronyms, and each county has their own local rules for domestic court. So like, for example, in Wake County, if the judge is in courtroom 2B, they can go out of order, but they can't in 2C. And then in 4D, you can only have trials over 7 hours. And it's like, I don't know, and so I was like scared that my managing attorney was going to be like, why did I take a chance on this girl? You know what I mean? Like, she came over here and she doesn't know anything. But just like she said, it's so important to find that work community and know what it is you want out of your work community. That way, when you're making the transition, interviewing places, you can ask those questions that will give you those answers. I know that I'm the kind of person where when I'm first learning something, I may ask 179 questions, but once I get it, I know it, and you'll never have to tell me again. And so I needed, management and trainers that were receptive to that. So that was one of the fears that I had. And then my other fear was kind of, like I said, losing stability. Going into a practice where, billables are, everything and so important, and, just the benefits that the state brings. Like, I was on track for loan forgiveness because I was a public servant. I, had my health insurance covered. And so, again, going back to knowing what it is you're looking for so that you can ask those tough questions, because my firm that I'm at now is not the only firm I interviewed for. And so when other firms started talking about their benefits, what they do and don't offer, like example, they would offer me a salary that is like, I can get jiggy with that, right? But they don't cover bar dues, they don't cover CLEs, they don't cover, and so you're coming out of your pocket $1,500. So that's why the salary looks like that, right? And so I would say that my fear was losing stability, not knowing exactly how the billable hours thing worked, because when you work for the government, that doesn't matter, right? If you spend 15 hours on a case, they, say good job and move along. And so that was a fear that I had. And so when I was interviewing, and especially when I came upon the firm that I was at now, I was able to say, these are the things that are important to me, knowing, just to be quite honest, what's going to be deposited in my bank account every payday. I need to know that, I need to know what you cover. If I don't make my billable hours for the month, what does that look like? So those were my fears, and then also learning, what I didn't want, from the things that made me leave my previous job, knowing how to ask the questions so that I know, am I about to walk into the same thing? Because that also was a fear of mine. Am I leaving one place to walk into the same thing again? So once you know what it is you do want, you know what you don't want, and you're able to ask those questions so that you can land somewhere that is good for you.
Thank you. And you all were already foreshadowing the next question here. So we talked a little bit about overcoming fears, patience and understanding, and a great work community. So we've kind of talked about, we're working a little bit backwards here, but I did want to know, when you all are interviewing or you're networking with other people and you're trying to get into this new role or your next role, or even if you're staying at your current job, what qualities are you looking for in the job? And what qualities are you looking for in management to make sure that it's a great fit for you all? And then Michelle, I think you already kind of touched on this. What questions or things are you asking to make sure that you can see those qualities shine through when you're asking those questions?
So when I ask those questions, again, I would kind of ask, like, what does training exactly look like, right? Because I didn't know, does that look like shadowing in court and I'm supposed to just pick it up? Does that look like you give me assignments? I write them and you give me feedback? getting a specific understanding about, okay, hey, I know I need to learn this stuff. I know I need to get a grip on this stuff. How is that going to happen? And making sure that it matches with my learning style. Like, I'm a read write learner. I'm the kind of person, like, let me do it and then give it back to you and mark up my paper, right? Because just hearing you talk about it, I'm not going to get it. So learning or asking, how that structure would work. Also, like I said, work-life balance, mental health was really important to me. So asking what the firm does to encourage that for their employees and make that, a priority. So I asked about, of course, every place is different now post-COVID. So is there a work from home, policy? If so, what does that look like? What does PTO look like? Asking those specific questions. And for people, like me, like Ayana, that are financially motivated. And I had to call my parents and ask them for advice for this, because this is the first time that I ever had to like negotiate a salary. Like, when you work for the government, they're just like, this is what it is. Do you want to come to work or not? Right. And so I had to like really assess my skills and what I'm bringing to the table, because I feel like a lot of times you forget that, like, this is a two-way street. I have things that I can bring to you, just like, you are offering things to me. And so, assessing what skills I do have, while also being really honest and assessing skills that I don't have or haven't acquired yet, because I was still really new in practice. I had been just shy of 2 years. And so I would just straight up ask, like, these are the things that I feel that I bring, as far as strengths, understanding that I still have things to learn. This is what I would like to be compensated. However, I'm happy to work, on a gradual schedule as I increase. So those are the kinds of questions that I asked. And I think that, again, this is a two-way street. You want to know what you're getting and giving. And so even though some of those questions can be uncomfortable, you'd rather be uncomfortable before you accept the job, because if you don't want it, you never have to see these people again, right? You'd rather be uncomfortable before than you get in and realize, like, I should have tried to foresee if this was going to be coming or not. You don't want to have like buyer's remorse.
I try to ask, one thing I really like to ask first in interviews are, what are your expectations of me or of someone in this role? Like, what do you envision this role looking like? Because a lot of times when you ask that question in interviews, they will give you an honest answer, and that will tell you everything you need to know about whether that is a position for you or whether that's someone that you can work with, right? Like, I interviewed for a position where someone was like, I need someone who's just going to take pretty much everything off of my plate. Not going to work for me, because this is a shared like working experience. And if you're going to be over me, I'm not taking all of your duties. And one, I'm not taking all of your duties and you're going to make twice my salary. That's not how this is going to happen. But also, I'm not going to take on all of your work and then you're just MIA and I'm handling everything and can't contact you, or like there's no oversight, there's no training, there's no help, building me up to get to where I want to go in my career. So that's a super important question for me. And then just, having like normal conversations with people. I like to chat just generally about like your life, who you are as a person, because I like to read people's personality to know if we're going to be a good working fit or not. I don't need a micromanager. And so someone who's like, I mean, I'm super type A, but someone who's like, well, I want to see everything that you do. And like, we need to sit down and read it together. I'm not 5 years old. I can read a red line, so it's just important to me to like chat about, do you have kids at home? Are you married? Are you not married? Like, not that those make any decisions, but like, are you just a normal human being, or is work your entire life? And are you going to expect me to make work my entire life? So those are two of the biggest things that I look for.
Yeah, I would definitely echo everything that's already been said. And then for me personally, I also asked about kind of, what does having kids look like? Like, is there flexibility with, if you need to leave work early, is there any kind of like work daycare? Like SAS, for instance, has and like an on office site daycare, which is really cool, and not a lot of places have that. And so, yeah, if you ask those questions, it just be honest about like what your needs are. They will definitely tell you, and you can figure out kind of if it will be a good fit or not. There were a couple of places I interviewed that it was definitely like you need to be available all the time. Like the more people who come in early, the better, or you need to be available after hours via email, and that was not going to work for me. So it's important to kind of like has been said before, just ask what the expectations are going to be, and see kind of what the work-life balance is going to look like. Because if you don't ask and then you go in, you could be completely blindsided. And yeah, just kind of chatting with people and seeing, what their work habits are, kind of maybe even what their history with the company is. Like, how did you get to where you were? Like, what did the role you used to look like, or you used to be in look like? And, how's that different from what you're doing now? And, especially if it's someone who's kind of building out a team like my manager was, just like how do you foresee your team being structured, like especially if it's like a new team that you're kind of building. So yeah, she definitely gave me all that information. It seemed like we would work well together. But there were other places where they were a little more vague on like, work-life balance or what would be available and what would not. And so if they're vague at all, that's probably not a good sign. If if you ask something and they are able to tell you or like find you the answer, that's a good indication that they're going to be someone that's good to work with, that the company is good to work with. So yeah, I would definitely say just ask about everything. Ask about family leave, ask about stock options, ask about vacation days, just like ask about all of it. And even if I mean, I would say maybe not in the very first interview, but like maybe in the first interview, kind of fill out, what the role is going to look like. And then as you progress, maybe ask for about what the specific benefits are going to be, and just kind of find that balance. But yeah, would definitely agree with everything that's been said before. If you don't ask, you won't know.
Thank you, Katie. And yeah, perfect line to end on there. If you don't ask, you won't know, because I want you all to put yourselves in the position of the one being asked the question. So if you were asked by a law student if there was one piece of advice that you wish you had when you were beginning your legal career, in the realm of, being on a growth track in your career, or considering future transitions. Again, I feel like you all have touched on a lot of good trinkets of advice, but if there was just one piece of advice that you would give to a law student asking you a question like this, what would that advice be? And let's start with Ayana on this one. Don't mean to put you on the spot if you didn't think.
My one piece of advice would just be like actually listen to yourself. You're not crazy. There's no right way to do this law career. There's so many avenues of being an attorney. There's new things growing every day. The field is changing, the world is changing. And there's unfortunately, like the way just the world is going, there's always going to be a need for legal services somewhere. So you're not going to be without a job, but just listen to yourself and don't allow other people to push you into a field you don't want to be in.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echo that and also say just to be flexible. Kind of, you may have one path that you thought you were going to go on, but if you open yourself up to different opportunities, it may be really great. Like when I was in law school, I never thought I was going to work for a bank. I never thought I would be in a corporate environment. I always kind of thought I would do family law or something similar, where I'm in more direct contact with people on a day-to-day basis. And then I went into that, it wasn't for me. And so I, opened myself up to a different type of opportunity, and it ended up being great. So I would just say be flexible, and even if you think, I would never want to do this, or I would never be happy in this type of role, just like make just be flexible and open, and even if it's not something you thought you were going to do, it's okay to try it, and it may be great.
My one piece of advice, if I could like kick it and be completely honest, don't be afraid to leave. I think a lot of times there's a stigma about if you're not somewhere for, a few years, then like there's something wrong with you. Um, I think that what made me kind of do the final, okay, I'm going to leave. My granddad is actually a judge, and he had been an attorney for 28 years before, he got his judgeship, and he kept saying, well, you were only there for, such a short time, like just under 2 years, like, how are you going to explain that to employers? What are they going to think? The average legal career is 25 years. Your first 3 years are too soon to burn out. And what I've realized is that when you are somewhere for a short amount of time, it's not about time, it's about experience. It's about skills. You can gain skills somewhere in 6 months. And when you leave and interview for other places, you still have a skill set that you can market. But yeah, in 25 years, you don't want to burn out in the first 5. So whatever your reasons are for leaving, of course, as long as you're not like being like unreasonable, right? But whatever your reasons are for leaving, they're yours and they're valid. Don't be afraid to go.
Thank you all for that. And Gabrielle, did we get any questions from the chat, or we just want to give just another minute or two for people to ask questions if they have any? If you want to just ask them out loud, feel free to do so.
No, I was telling Trey we didn't get any in the chat, but the questions asked and the answers I feel like were really, really great. Thank you to our guests. I really enjoyed this myself.
And I'll just give just another moment or two just to see if we have any last questions. But while we wait, I just wanted to thank our amazing panelists for the insight and for the nuggets for answering these hard questions and giving us some good key takeaways to take home with us and to even share with our friends. I know this is being recorded, so we cannot thank you all enough for giving your nuggets to everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the invite and thanks for putting this together. Y'all did a great job moderating. You had some tough questions, so thanks for that.
Thank you. And so I see we don't have any more questions. So again, I just want to thank everyone for attending, both our guests and panelists. I see Michelle's put her email in the chat as well. If you want to chat afterwards, I believe Trey and I can put our emails in there too. We want to thank you all for coming today. And then we also have an upcoming event on Friday with the antitrust and business dispute group as well. We are going to the Durham Bulls game on Friday, April 4th at 6:35. It is open to NCBA members and guests, so feel free to let us know if you're interested in that as well. So we hope to see you Friday as we continue a great week of events for the North Carolina Bar Association.
Thank you, guys.
I said it all. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.